It looks better on her. Atticus? Sterling? Said his voice flat, dismissive as my diamond. The antique Art Deco solitaire he'd given me for our 20th anniversary glinted on my sister's hand. A cold nausea coiled in Mylene's gut, threatening to choke off her breath. But even as the room spun her mind, a precision instrument of calculation registered the spare key tucked deep in her coat pocket. The ghost access code to Sterling Ridge Realty. A silent mantra in her thoughts. The wind coming off of the tarmac at Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International had been biting that night. The kind of cold that sneaks through the finest cashmere, settling deep in the marrow. Mylene had just landed after 3 exhausting days in New York, saving a multi-million-dollar deal that her husband Atticus had nearly torpedoed with his characteristic blend of charm and incompetence. She was worn out, her eyes burning from lack of sleep, her shoulders aching from the familiar weight of her laptop bag. All she craved was a hot shower, a glass of full-bodied Cabernet, and the deceptive comfort of her Buckhead estate. She wanted to tell Atticus that she had fixed his mess, that Sterling Ridge Realty, the empire they had built over 22 grueling years, was safe for another quarter. As she pulled her Bentley into the sweeping driveway, the living room lights of their mansion blazed against the frost-covered lawn. It was past 10 o'clock. Odd. Usually the house was a silent cathedral by this hour. Atticus ensconced in his study, her son Cale lost in the digital battles of his video games. Mylene unlocked the heavy oak door, dropping her keys into the ornate silver bowl on the reception table. The silence that greeted her was not peaceful. It was heavy-charged, like the oppressive air before a summer storm. "Hello," she called out, her voice echoing hollowly in the grand foyer. "Atticus Cale, I'm home. Mylene, darling, we're in the great room." Her mother. Ilara Thorne trilled her voice, a brittle counterpoint to the tense silence. Mylena's stomach tightened. Ilara lived a 40-minute drive away. What was she doing here on a Tuesday night? A sudden sharp panic gripped her. Had something happened to Serafina? Was someone ill? She rushed towards the living room, her heart hammering against her ribs. But it wasn't a medical emergency. It was a tableau, a carefully staged courtroom. They were all there, arranged on the designer leather sofa she had chosen last Christmas. Atticus was seated in the center, impeccably dressed in a white shirt, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. To his left sat Ilara, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. To his right, Serafina, Mylene's younger sister, and in the adjacent armchair, Cale, her 21-year-old son. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one cried. No one looked sad. They looked resolute, a jury delivering a verdict. "What is going on?" Mylene asked, her breath catching. "Is everyone okay, Mother?" She took a step forward, but Cale rose. He didn't come to hug her. He stood, planted a young security guard, blocking a door, his eyes devoid of the warmth she had nurtured for 2 decades. "Mum, sit down." Cale said, his voice cold, deeper than she remembered, stripped of all affection. "You have to listen and not make a scene." A scene. Mylene felt a prickle of alarm. "Cale, you're scaring me. What is this? You have to accept a new reality." He continued reciting words that sounded rehearsed, as if someone had drilled them into him. "You're not in charge of this family anymore." Mylene looked at Atticus. "Atticus, why aren't you saying anything?" Atticus finally looked up. His handsome face, the face that had been the public image of their company for years, twisted into a grimace of pity mixed with annoyance. "It's over, Mylene. The farce is finished." What farce? She felt like she was drowning on dry land, the polished floor beneath her feet tilting precariously. Aunt Serafina, Cale said, pointing a finger at Mylene's sister. "She makes Father happier now. Unlike you, she understands him." The world stopped spinning. Mylene looked at Serafina. Her little sister, the one whose rent she had paid for 6 years, the one she had hired, when no one else would give her a job. Serafina sat cross-legged, a silken blouse, suspiciously like one missing from Myleen's own closet, clinging to her. And then Myleen saw it. Atticus's hand rested casually possessively on Serafina's knee. "We didn't want you to find out from a stranger." Ilara interjected, her voice not apologetic, but lecturing. "We wanted to do this as a family." "Myleen, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your job for years. Atticus is a man with needs. He needs a wife who is present, not a partner who sleeps with her laptop." Mother Myleen whispered, the betrayal cutting deeper than any knife. "You knew you're approving of this." "I'm supporting happiness," Ilara said, raising her chin defiantly. Serafina and Atticus share a connection. They love each other, Myleen. It wasn't something they planned. It just happened. You can't punish them for falling in love. Myleen looked at Serafina. Serafina offered a small, triumphant smile. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked down. On her finger, sparkling under the recessed lights, was a diamond ring. It wasn't a new ring. It was Myleen's ring. The antique Art Deco diamond Atticus had given her for their 20th anniversary. The one that had mysteriously disappeared from her jewelry box 6 months ago. Myleen had turned the house upside down, looking for it, crying for days. Atticus had told her she was careless, that she probably lost it at the gym. "That's my ring," Myleen said, her voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt hot in her throat. "It looks better on her," Atticus said with a shrug. "It was a waste on you. You never wear jewelry anyway. We want you to move out," Cale said, breaking the silence again. "Father is keeping the house. I'm staying here. It's better if you leave. You create too much tension." Her son, her baby, whom she had nursed through fevers, whose college tuition she paid by working 80 hours a week, was throwing her out of the house. She built. "Are you choosing this?" Myleen asked Cale, tears finally stinging her eyes. "Are you choosing the woman who sleeps with your father behind my back? That's your Aunt Cale." "She's not just my aunt anymore," Cale spat out. "She's the only one who actually listens to me. You just throw money at me and tell me to study." Father and Serafina. They treat me like an adult. Myleen looked at the four of them. Her husband, her sister, her mother, her son. The 4 pillars of her life. And every one of them was rotten. They weren't just breaking her heart. They were dismantling her existence with a cruelty that took her breath away. She felt a wave of nausea, but she swallowed it down. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't beg. She straightened her back. She looked at Atticus, boring her eyes into his, until he winced and looked away. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice quiet but deadly firm. "You think you can rewrite history just because you're bored and selfish? Don't make a scene," Mylena Serafina said, her voice clawingly sweet. "Let's be mature about this divorce." "Divorce?" Myleen let out a short, dry laugh. "Oh, you have no idea what's coming. Don't threaten us," Atticus snapped, regaining his arrogance. "I've already spoken to Julian Croft, the best lawyer in Atlanta. The prenuptial agreement, the company bylaws, I have it all covered. Get out that door, Myleen. If you stay, I'll have security remove you from my property." "Your property?" Myleen looked around the room. "I chose every tile in this house. I paid for every brick. And now you're trespassing," Cale said. That was it. The final break. Myleen looked at her son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. "All right," she said. She turned. She didn't take her coat from the rack. She didn't pick up her keys from the bowl. She had her spare set, heavy and cold, in her pocket. She walked towards the door. "Where are you going?" Ilara shouted, a sudden anxiety in her voice. "Myleen, we need to discuss the settlement. Atticus has a generous offer if you sign tonight." Myleen didn't answer. She opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the frosty Atlanta night. The wind hit her face, drying the tears before they could fall. She got into her car, the engine purring to life in the silence of the driveway. As she backed out, she saw them through the living room window. They were already pouring champagne. Celebrating her elimination, she drove into the darkness, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing for certain. The Mylene. They knew the doormat, the provider, the fix-it-all had died in that living room. And the woman driving away was someone they should fear dearly. Mylene drove for an hour, the city lights of Atlanta blurring into red and gold streaks through her windshield. Her mind was a chaotic storm of images. Serafina's smirk, the ring on her finger, Cale's cold stare. But beneath the shock, a primal instinct was activating. Survival. She needed gas. The low fuel light had been blinking since she left the airport, but she'd been too anxious to get home to stop. Now, on a desolate stretch of the I-285, she pulled into a 24-hour gas station. Her hands were shaking as she stepped out into the bitter cold. She slid her platinum credit card, the one linked to their joint account, the one she used for everything from grocery shopping to multi-million-dollar business dinners, into the pump. Processing. The screen blinked then in stark red letters. Denied. Please see attendant. Mylene frowned. It was impossible. The credit limit on that card was $50,000, and she had paid the balance in full 3 days ago. She tried again. Denied. A cold knot formed in her stomach, heavier than the betrayal she had just witnessed. She searched her purse and pulled out her personal debit card, the one linked to her checking account where her salary was deposited. She walked into the station. The clerk, a bored teenager with earbuds around his neck, didn't even look up as Mylene placed a bottle of water and a pack of gum on the counter. She swiped the debit card. No go, he mumbled, chewing his gum. Try again. Mylene said, her voice tight. There's money. He sighed and swiped it one more time. Denied now. Insufficient funds or blocked card. Got no cash. Mylene stood there paralyzed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her bank account. She had to check them. Her fingers fumbled with her phone as she logged in. Access denied. User authentication failed. Please contact your bank. She tried the company account. Access denied. She tried the joint savings account. Access denied. Atticus hadn't just thrown her out of the house. He had executed a financial kill switch. He had been planning this. You don't lock a co-owner out of business and personal accounts instantly, unless you've prepped the ground with the bank falsely alleging fraud or changing administrative privileges days in advance. He wanted her destitute. He wanted her stranded in the middle of the night without resources, so she would crawl back and sign whatever generous offer Ilara had mentioned. Mylene rummaged in her purse, past the useless plastic, down to the small zippered pocket at the bottom. She found 3 crumpled $20 bills and a handful of change. $60. That was her net worth right now. She paid for $20 worth of gas and the water with the cash. She got back in her car, trembling not just from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of her vulnerability. She couldn't go to a hotel. She didn't have a credit card for the deposit. She couldn't go to her mother's house. She couldn't go to Serafina's. She drove until she found a roadside motel with a blinking neon sign that read, Vacancy. It was one of those places where truckers slept for a few hours. The kind of place where the sheets smelled of stale smoke and regret. Prepaid, the night manager said through a reinforced glass pane. $50 for the night. Mylene handed him $50 of her remaining $60. He slid a key through the tray. Room 12. The room was freezing. The heater rattled and spat out air that smelled of burnt dust. Mylene sat on the edge of the sunken mattress, still in her expensive business suit, her coat pulled tightly around her. She looked at her phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. No apologies. No please come back. 118 missed calls. Most were from a number she recognized: Julian Croft, Atticus's personal lawyer, a shark of the highest order. And then the emails started rolling in. Subject: marriage dissolution agreement. Subject: urgent non-disclosure agreement required. Subject: termination notice. Sterling Ridge Realty. Mylene opened the termination notice first. It was a PDF attached to an email from Brenner, the HR director. A woman Mylene had hired, a woman she had mentored. Dear Dubois. It read, effective immediately. Your position as Chief Operating Officer is terminated for cause. Allegations of corporate espionage and gross negligence. Mylene laughed, a harsh, rasping sound in the empty room. Espionage, negligence. She was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. auditing the books. She was the one who knew every zoning law in the county. Atticus didn't even know how to convert a PDF without asking for her help. And then a text message came through. It was from Kyle. Her thumb hovered over the screen, a small, foolish part of her hoping he had run away, that he was sorry. Mum, don't make this harder. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition and trust fund if you fight the divorce. He's promised me the VP position next year if I stick with him. You always told me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. Mylene dropped the phone on the bed as if it burned. That was the final erasure. Atticus hadn't just taken her money and her job. He had bought her son's soul. He had used the wealth she helped build to bribe her own child against her. She curled up on the grungy bedspread, knees pulled to her chest. The tears finally came hot and fast. She cried for the baby she read bedtime stories to. She cried for the sister she protected on the playground. She cried for the husband she believed in when he was nothing but a smile in a cheap suit. But as the night wore on and the tears dried into salty crusts on her cheeks, something else began to settle in her chest. It was cold and heavy, like a stone. They thought they had erased her. They thought that by taking away her credit cards and passwords, they had taken her power. They forgot one thing. They forgot who built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who drafted the contracts, and who knew where the bodies were buried. Atticus thought Sterling Ridge ran on his charm. He was about to learn that it ran on Mylene's brain. And while he might have stolen the front door keys, he had forgotten that the architect always leaves a back door. Mylene stared at the water stain on the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. She was no longer Mylene the wife. She was no longer Mylene the mother. She was Mylene the architect, and she was about to tear the whole house down. Sleep was impossible in that motel room. The highway traffic noise was a constant drone, but it was the noise in her head that truly kept her awake. Sharp, jagged memories played on a loop. To understand why she was lying on a filthy mattress with $10 in her pocket, Mylene had to backtrack. She had to look at the very foundation of her life and realize it had been cracked from the start. She grew up in a small town in rural Alabama, the eldest of 2 daughters. Her father had died when she was 7, leaving her mother Ilara to raise them alone. His death broke something in Ilara, or perhaps it just revealed who she truly was. She was a woman who needed to be adored to be the center of attention, and she projected that need onto her daughters, or rather onto one of them. Serafina was born beautiful. Even as a baby, she had golden curls and big blue eyes that made strangers stop on the street. Mylene was plain brown hair, serious eyes, sturdy. She was the responsible one. Serafina was the princess. Mylene remembered the day she turned 18. She had just received her acceptance letter to Wharton Business School and a partial scholarship. It was her ticket out. She had worked 3 part-time jobs, all through high school tutoring, waitressing, shelving books at the library to save up for the rest of the tuition. She ran into the kitchen, waving the letter. Mum, I got in. Elara was at the table painting Serafina's fingernails. Serafina was 12, then already demanding and petulant. That's nice, Mylene, her mother said without looking up. But keep your voice down. Serafina has a headache. But Mum, it's Wharton. It's a business degree. Elara sighed, finally looking at her. Her eyes weren't filled with pride. They were calculating. Mylene, honey, we need to talk about that money you've saved. Your college fund. Well, Serafina has been discovered. There's a modeling contest in Miami next month. It could be her big break. But the fees, the travel, the portfolio shots, it's expensive. Mylene's heart sank. Mum, that's my tuition money. I earned it. How selfish you are, Mylena Serafina intervened, blowing on her wet nails. You don't want me to be famous. I'll buy you a car when I'm rich. Mylene, her mother said, her voice taking on that tone, the one that mixed guilt with a command. You're the strong one. You're smart. You can always find a way. You can work another year, go to night classes. But Serafina, she's delicate. This is her dream. You wouldn't want to crush your sister's dream, would you? Families sacrifice for each other. Mylene gave them the money. Of course she did. She had been conditioned for 18 years to believe that her value lay solely in what she could provide for them. She was the workhorse, the mule, the fixer. Serafina was the golden child, the star, the one who deserved to shine. Serafina went to Miami. She wasn't hired. She spent the money on clothes and theme parks. Mylene spent the next year working double shifts at a restaurant to earn the money back. She started college a year late, exhausted but determined. That dynamic never changed. It just evolved. When Mylena graduated at the top of her class, her mother didn't come to the ceremony because Serafina had severe anxiety over a 2-week breakup with a boyfriend. Mylene walked across the stage alone. When she got her first big promotion at a financial consulting firm, her mother said, "That's great, honey. Hey, can you loan Serafina $2,000? Her landlord is being awful." Mylene paid Serafina's rent. She paid for her car repairs. She paid for her acting classes. Serafina never attended. She bought her mother a condo so she wouldn't have to worry about stairs. She thought she was buying their love. She thought if she just gave enough, worked enough, fixed enough problems, they would finally look at her the way they looked at Serafina. She thought one day her mother would look at her face and say, "I'm so proud of you, Mylene. You are my joy." But Mylene was never her joy. She was her electric bill. She was her safety net. And then she met Atticus. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to see her. He told her she was brilliant. He told her she was beautiful. Mylene didn't realize then that he had the same calculating look in his eyes as her mother. He didn't see a soulmate. He saw a host. He saw a woman trained to give everything and ask for nothing in return. He fit perfectly into the empty space in her heart that her mother and sister had hollowed out. She married him, thinking she was building a new family, a better family. Lying in the dark motel room, the revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't escaped her family dynamic by marrying Atticus. She had recreated it. Atticus was the golden child demanding adoration and resources. She was still the workhorse toiling in the shadows to keep the lights on. And Serafina was just the inevitable conclusion. The two parasites in Mylene's life had finally found each other. "You're the strong one, Mylene." Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Well, Elara was right about one thing. Mylene was strong. Strong enough to carry them for 40 years. And now, God help them, she was strong enough to let go. She sat up on the bed, the metal springs squeaking. She wasn't going to cry anymore. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. They wanted delicate Serafina. They wanted dreamer Atticus. Fine. They could have each other, but they couldn't have Mylene's money. They couldn't have her company. She picked up her laptop bag. It was time to stop being the sacrificing daughter. It was time to be the CEO who liquidates toxic assets. The morning sun filtered through the motel room's dirty curtains, casting long, dusty shadows on the floor. Mylene opened her laptop. Thankfully, she had a portable Wi-Fi hotspot in her bag, a habit from years of business travel. Atticus couldn't cut off a device he didn't know existed. She didn't try to log into the bank accounts yet. She knew those doors were shut tight. Instead, she opened a file she'd named SR Blueprint for Destruction. RTF to understand how she was going to dismantle Atticus's world. To truly unravel him, she had to understand how she had built him in the first place. Mylene met Atticus 22 years ago at a real estate networking event in downtown Atlanta. He was 29, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass of cheap wine, and holding court with a group of investors. He was electric. He had a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo, a laugh that made you feel like the funniest person in the world. Mylene was 25, a junior analyst at one of the big consulting firms, standing in a corner clutching her binder of market studies. She watched him move across the room. He was charismatic, yes, but she could hear what he was saying. He was spouting jargon, making promises about returns that were mathematically impossible. He cornered her by the buffet. "Looks like you're analyzing the structural integrity of the shrimp skewers," he quipped. "No." Mylene smiled faintly. "I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% return on a property in a declining district. You're going to lose them their money." He blinked in surprise. Then he laughed, a genuine booming sound. "Okay, you caught me. I'm a big ideas guy, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff." "The boring stuff is what keeps you out of jail," Mylene said dryly. He fell in love with her, or at least with what she could do for him right then and there. Within 6 months, they were married. In 1 year, they founded Sterling Ridge Realty. The division of labor was established immediately. Atticus was the face. He was the CEO. He took the client meetings, golfed with developers, and gave interviews to the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. He loved the spotlight. He loved the title. Mylene was the architect. She was the chief operating officer. But in reality, she was everything else. She sourced the properties, negotiated the loans, managed the contractors, fought with City Hall over zoning licenses, did the taxes, payroll, and legal compliance. Their first big project was a disaster waiting to happen. Atticus had bought a dilapidated warehouse in South Atlanta, convinced it would be the next big loft conversion. He paid $500,000 too much. The contractor he hired ran off with the deposit. They were on the verge of bankruptcy before they had even sold a single unit. Mylene remembered sitting at their kitchen table, pregnant with Kyle, staring at the red numbers in the ledger. Atticus paced, sweating through his shirt, panicking. "We're finished, Mylene. My reputation is ruined. I'm going to be sued." "Sit down," she commanded. Mylene took her grandmother's jewelry, the only inheritance she had received, safe from Ilara and Serafina, and sold it. She liquidated her retirement fund. She renegotiated terms with the bank, presenting a business plan so detailed, so bulletproof, that the branch manager said it was the best he had ever seen. She fired Atticus's friend, who was acting as project manager, and took over site supervision herself, walking through construction zones with a hard hat and a 6-month bump. They finished the project. They sold out in 3 weeks. Atticus was hailed as a visionary in the business press. The headline read, "Atticus Sterling, the new king of lofts." He brought the magazine home beaming. "Look at this baby. We did it." He didn't mention her in the interview once. When she gently pointed it out, he kissed her on the forehead. "Honey, you know how the media is. They like a single narrative. Plus, you hate the spotlight. You're my secret weapon, the power behind the throne." She accepted it. She told herself it was for the family. She told herself that as long as the company succeeded, it didn't matter whose face was on the cover. She was a fool for 20 years. She built the stage, set the lights, and wrote the script. Atticus just walked out and took the applause. The company grew. They expanded into commercial properties, luxury condos, mixed-use developments. They were worth millions. But the company's structure that was Mylene's masterpiece. Atticus was lazy with details. He hated reading contracts. He hated passwords. "You fix it, Mylene," was his favorite phrase. So she set up the digital infrastructure, created the intricate web of LLCs to limit liability, configured the automated bank transfers. And because Atticus was paranoid about employees stealing from him, he insisted on a localized, highly encrypted internal server for our most sensitive financial data. He wanted ghost access, a master administrator login that could bypass all other protocols in case they ever got locked out or held hostage by IT staff. "Only you and I will know the ghost access," he had said, puffing out his chest. But Atticus never bothered to memorize the complex 64-character string Mylene generated. He wrote it on a post-it, kept it in his desk drawer for a week, and then threw it away, assuming Mylene would always be there to type it for him. He was right. She was always there, until yesterday. Now, sitting in the motel, Mylene looked at the login screen for the private Sterling Ridge server. The VPN tunnel was secure. Atticus thought that calling the bank and removing her as a signatory had cut off her access. He thought that firing her through HR had revoked her access. He relied on standard protocols. He relied on the front door. He forgot about the ghost access. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed the string of characters. It wasn't a random sequence. It was a verse from a forgotten poem she loved, interwoven with the GPS coordinates of the first building they bought, and the date Kyle lost his first tooth. Atticus knew none of those things. Authenticating, access granted, administrator level. The screen flooded with data. The entire nervous system of Sterling Ridge was open before her. Emails, wire transfers, ledger records, tax documents, private chat histories. She wasn't just looking at a company. She was looking at the crime scene of her marriage. Mylene started downloading. She didn't want just a few files. She wanted everything. Every email Atticus had sent in the last 5 years, every expense report, every wire transfer to the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. The data streamed onto an encrypted external drive she pulled from her bag. Each click, each progress bar, was a measured beat of her awakening, and that's when she saw it. A folder labeled Project S. It wasn't a construction project. The S stood for Serafina. Mylene opened the folder and the blood ran cold in her veins. This wasn't just an affair. This was large-scale embezzlement. Dates, amounts, receipts. January 12th. Transfer of $50,000 to Serafina Thorne. Consulting LLC. Serafina's maiden name. February 13th. 14th. $12,000. At Tiffany & Company, March 1st, $4,500 for monthly rent of a luxury suite at the St. Regis. He had been keeping Serafina as a concubine with company money for 3 years. But it went even deeper. Mylene saw transfers to a phantom company she didn't recognize, Orion Holdings Group. The signatory for Orion wasn't Atticus, it was Serafina. And the assets being transferred into Orion weren't just cash. They were deeds. Atticus was slowly transferring the titles of their most valuable unencumbered properties into a company owned by her sister. He was gutting Sterling Ridge, preparing to leave Mylene with an empty shell, while he and Serafina walked away with the assets. Mylene felt sick. This wasn't just replacing her as a wife. This was grand larceny. But as she scrolled through the documents, a cold smile touched her lips. Atticus was an actor, not an architect. He didn't understand the paperwork he was signing. In his arrogance and Serafina's greed, they had made mistakes, amateur sloppy mistakes. They had forged Mylene's signature on several deed transfers. She could see it in the PDFs, a clumsy digital copy of her signature, from a different document, clearly lifted from a routine form she'd signed years ago. And in Orion Holdings Group's operating agreement, Serafina had listed her permanent address. It was Mylene's address, the house Mylene paid for. Mylene had them. She had them dead to rights, but she couldn't strike yet. If she went to the police now, Atticus would claim it was an administrative error. He would pay a fine and bury her in litigation for years. He had the money for expensive lawyers. Mylene had $10. She didn't need to let them hang themselves. She needed them to feel safe. She needed them to think she was defeated, ruined, and hiding in a hole. She closed the laptop. She had the blueprints for their destruction. Now she just needed to build the trap. The digital evidence of Project S burned in Mylene's mind, forcing her to recall exactly how Serafina had infiltrated her sanctuary. It had begun 5 years ago, a time when Sterling Ridge was booming and Mylene's guard was down. Serafina had just gone through her 3rd divorce. Her ex-husband, a decent mechanic named Desmond, left her because she refused to work and spent his salary on designer bags she couldn't afford. She showed up on Mylene's doorstep with 2 suitcases and a tearful story that would have won an Oscar. He was abusive, Mylene, she cried, throwing herself into Mylene's arms. Mylene later learned abusive meant he had cut off her credit card. I have nowhere to go. Mum said you would help me. Ilara called Mylene. 10 minutes later. Mylene, you have that big house with all those empty guest rooms. Let your sister stay for a few weeks. She just needs to recover. Family helps family. Mylene agreed. She always agreed. 1 week turned into 6 months. Serafina spent her days by Mylene's infinity pool, sipping Mylene's wine and critiquing Mylene's landscapers. Atticus, at the time, seemed annoyed by her presence. She's a leech, Mylene, he'd complained. She treats our house like a hotel. Mylene, ever the protector, had defended her. She's grieving, Atticus. Give her time. Then came the request. I need a job, Serafina announced one night at dinner. I'm bored. I want to work for you guys. Mylene nearly choked. Serafina, we run a commercial real estate firm. It's high pressure. What skills do you have for this? I'm good with people, she insisted. I can be, I don't know, client relations. I can organize the parties. You two are so serious. You need someone fun. No, Mylene said. It was one of the few times she put her foot down. But Ilara intervened. She drove 40 minutes to have coffee with Mylene. Mylene, this is Serafina's chance to be responsible. If you don't give her a job, she'll flounder. Do you want her living on your sofa forever? Give her a salary. Let her move out. Ilara paused, then added smoothly. Atticus thinks it's a good idea too. Mylene blinked. Atticus. I talked to him, Ilara said. He thinks Serafina could help soften the company image. You know you can be a little intense, honey. Mylene confronted Atticus. You want to hire Serafina? Atticus shrugged, adjusting his tie. Your mother's right. We need someone to handle the social side, the galas, the charity events. You hate that stuff. Let her do it. Pay her an assistant's salary. Get her out of the house. We all win. So, Mylene did. She created a position director of special events. At first it seemed to work. Serafina moved into an apartment Mylene subsidized and organized the company Christmas party. It was lavish over budget, but a success. Then the subtle shifts began. Serafina started coming into the office every day, dressed not in business attire, but in tight dresses that were just on the edge of inappropriate. She spent hours in Atticus's office discussing event logistics. Mylene would walk past and hear them laughing. Whenever she entered the room, they would stop. "What's so funny?" Mylene would ask, feeling a prickle of unease she couldn't quite name. "Just a joke about a client," Serafina would say, smiling that saccharine smile. "You wouldn't get it, Mylena. It's an inside joke." She started joining them for business lunches. Then she started replacing Mylene at them. "Mylene, you stay back and finish the quarterly projections," Atticus would say. "Serafina and I will take the developers to the steakhouse. You know you hate small talk." And Mylene did hate small talk. She loved the work, so she let them go. She stayed at the office, eating a salad at her desk, running the numbers, making sure their profit margins were healthy, while her husband and her sister drank martinis and laughed at her expense. Mylene noticed changes in Atticus. He started dressing younger. He bought a Porsche he didn't need. He started staying out late for networking. When Mylena voiced her concern, Ilara gaslit her to infinity. "You're being paranoid, Mylene," she'd scolded. "You should be glad Atticus and Serafina get along. Most men hate their in-laws. It's a blessing. Don't ruin it with your jealousy. It's beneath you." "It's jealousy." Ilara made Mylene feel like a crazy, insecure harpy. Now looking at the Project S folder on her laptop, she saw the chilling reality. The networking dinners were dates. The business trips to Miami were vacations. And the consulting fees paid to Serafina were actually her allowance for being his mistress. The snake hadn't just slithered into the grass. Mylene had opened the door, invited her in, and given her warm milk. And the worst part, her mother had held the door open. Ilara had brokered this. She had pushed Serafina toward Atticus, knowing exactly what Serafina was capable of. She wanted Serafina to have the life Mylena built. Because in her twisted mind, Serafina deserved the kingdom, and Mylene was just the builder destined to raise it and walk away. Mylene slammed her hand against the cheap motel desk. The sharp pain anchored her to reality. "Okay," she whispered to the empty room. "You want to play the fun, irresponsible game? Let's see how much fun it is when the architect pulls the load-bearing wall." Mylene spent the next 6 hours in a trance of forensic accounting. The ghost access gave her everything, but she had to be careful. If she made any changes, if she altered any file, the system logs could alert the IT director, a man named Ethan, who used to be loyal to her but now undoubtedly answered to Atticus. So Mylene became a ghost herself. She copied. She downloaded, she screenshotted, she traced the flow of money. It was worse than she thought. Sterling Ridge Realty was hemorrhaging money to fund their lifestyle and the transfers to Serafina's shell company. Atticus had stopped paying vendors. They were 3 months behind on payments to the construction crews for the new skyscraper in the financial district. They were in default on the interest for 2 major loans. Atticus was robbing Peter to pay Serafina. Her company, Mylene's life's work, was a house of cards. If the creditors found out, they would be insolvent in 30 days. But then Mylene found something that made her sit bolt upright. It was an email chain between Atticus and a private investigator called Preston Investigations. The date was 2 years ago. Subject surveillance, target Dubois. Atticus Preston. "I need dirt. Whatever it is, infidelity, substance abuse, mental instability. I need grounds to avoid the prenuptial. Preston, Mr. Sterling." We followed her for 6 months. She goes to work. She goes to the grocery store. She goes to her mother's house. She works late. There's no dirt. The woman is a saint. Atticus Preston, look harder or invent something. I can't afford to give her half. Mylene stopped breathing. 2 years. He had been planning to get rid of her for 2 years. But he couldn't find a way to do it without losing money. And then a more recent email dated 1 week ago. Atticus Preston, forget the dirt. We go with the mental collapse angle. Her family will testify. Her mother and sister are on board. We'll claim she's overworked, paranoid, unfit to lead. We'll force a motion of no confidence at the board meeting. Once she's out, we trigger the buyout clause at the lowest valuation. Attached was a separate email. Ilara to Atticus. Atticus. I can testify that she's been erratic lately. Very emotional. I'm worried about her, Atticus. We need to do what's best for the company. Mylene stared at the screen, the tears of rage blurring her vision. Her mother, her own mother, was conspiring to have Mylene declared mentally unstable, so her golden child could steal Mylene's husband and Mylene's money. You want erratic, Mylene murmured. I'll show you erratic. She dug deeper. She needed leverage. The evidence of fraud was good, but it would take time to prove in court. She needed something immediate, something that would terrify Atticus. She found it in the tax filings. Last year, to secure a massive loan from a private equity firm, Atticus had inflated the occupancy rates of their commercial properties. He had forged lease agreements. He had physically falsified the signatures of tenants who didn't exist. This wasn't just civil fraud. This was bank fraud. This was a federal felony with prison time, and the loan documents were signed by Atticus Sterling, CEO. Mylene's signature wasn't on them. She had been out of town for her aunt's funeral that week. A funeral Serafina skipped, and Atticus had said he would handle the paperwork. He had signed his own death warrant and didn't even know it. Mylene copied the loan documents. She copied the fake leases. She built a dossier that was a nuclear bomb. She looked at the clock. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. She had been working non-stop for 12 hours. She was starving. She hadn't washed, and she was running purely on adrenaline. She needed a burner phone. She couldn't use her cell. They were probably tracking it or pulling the records. She walked to a convenience store across the street, buying a cheap, prepaid phone with cash. Back in the room, she sat on the bed and looked at the new phone. Who could she call? Her friends. Most were shared couple friends with Atticus. They would probably side with charming Atticus or remain neutral. Her family obviously not. Her employees too risky. She needed someone powerful, someone who hated Atticus, someone with the resources to wage a war. One man popped into her head, Bartholomew Barty Vance. Barty was a billionaire real estate magnate in Atlanta. Old money, ruthless, but principled. 3 years ago, Atticus had beaten Barty for a prime land acquisition in the Beltline development. Atticus had won by bribing a city councilman to rezone the land, a move Mylene had fiercely opposed, but which Atticus did behind her back. Barty had suspected foul play. He had publicly called Atticus a cheap-suited climber. Atticus had laughed it off, but Barty Vance never forgot. If Mylene went to Barty Vance with proof of Atticus's fraud, specifically the fraud that had cost Barty that deal, it was a long shot. Barty might just laugh at her. He might turn her away. But he was the only person in Atlanta with enough power to shield her from Atticus's legal team and help her strike back. Mylene dialed the number for Vance Enterprises. She knew it by heart. She had looked it up enough times when they were rivals. Vance Enterprises office of the chairman. A crisp voice answered. I need to speak to Mr. Vance immediately. Mr. Vance is in meetings. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Mylene Dubois, she said. Tell him I know how Atticus Sterling got the Beltline acquisition rezoned, and tell him I have the emails. There was a pause. 1 moment, please. 30 seconds later, a deep, gravelly voice was on the line. Mrs. Dubois. To what do I owe the pleasure? Did your husband send you to gloat? My husband just fired me. Drained my bank accounts and put his mistress in my house. Mylene said, her voice steady. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Vance. I'm here to burn him to ashes. And I thought you might want to bring the marshmallows. Silence, then a low chuckle. I'm listening. Before Mylene went to meet Barty Vance, there was one more wound. She had to cauterize a file she'd been avoiding in the Sterling Ridge database Kale's trust fund. Kale was Mylene's soft spot, her Achilles heel. She had protected him from Atticus's narcissism his entire life. When Atticus forgot Cale's birthday, Mylene bought the gift and signed Atticus's name. When Atticus missed Kael's soccer games, Mylene told Cale that father was working hard for their future. She had raised him to believe his father was a hero, covering up the reality that his father was a negligent egotist. Now she realized that was her biggest mistake. She had protected Cale from the truth, and in doing so, she had allowed Atticus to buy his loyalty with lies. Mylene opened the trust fund documents. Atticus had recently modified the terms. Originally, the fund was to be paid out at age 25, conditional upon college graduation. The new terms, dated 2 weeks ago, immediate access to a $200,000 cash distribution transfer of title for the 2023 Porsche 911, and the attached correspondence. Cale Dad. Mum is going to flip if I drop out next semester. Atticus' mum isn't going to be in charge much longer, Jay. She treats you like a child. I treat you like a man. You want the car. You want the cash. You just have to back me up when the time comes. You have to tell the lawyers. Mum has been acting strange, that she's unstable. Cale, well, she has been kind of stressed lately. Atticus. Exactly. She's losing it. We have to protect the company. If you stick with me, I'll make you VP of Acquisitions next year. No degree needed. You can learn on the job like I did. Cale VP. Seriously, okay, I'm in. What do I have to do? Mylene read the words, and her heart didn't just break, it turned to dust. VP of Acquisitions. Cale was failing intro to economics. He spent his weekends playing video games and sleeping until noon. He wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a department in a multi-million-dollar company. Atticus was setting him up to fail, stroking his ego to use him as a pawn against her. And Cale, her sweet boy, had sold his mother out for a Porsche and a title he hadn't earned. She remembered the text he sent her last night. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition. He wasn't worried about tuition. He was worried about easy money. Mylene pulled up Cale's credit card statement, the one she paid. Nobleman's Liquor, $400. Capital Nightclub, $10,000. Bail bonds, $500. He was in a downward spiral, and instead of parenting him, Atticus was funding that spiral to buy an ally. Mylene picked up her burner phone, hesitating. He was her son. But the boy who sat on that sofa and told her to accept reality wasn't the boy she raised. He was his father's creation. If she continued to cushion his fall, she would lose him forever to Atticus's world of corruption and superficiality. The only way to truly save him was to let him crash. She typed a text message. She didn't send it yet. She just wrote it, staring at the cursor. Cale, I saw the emails. I saw the car. You chose the easy way, but the easy way is a trap. When your father is done using you, he will discard you just like me. I love you enough to let you learn this the hard way. Good luck, Mr. Vice President. She saved the draft. She dried her eyes. She navigated to the payroll system. She removed Cale from the intern payroll he had been on for 3 years, despite never stepping foot in the office. She couldn't touch the trust fund. Atticus controlled it now. But she could touch the health insurance. Cale was on her policy. The policy she paid for personally. Remove dependent Cale Sterling. Reason no longer a full-time student. It was petty. It was small. But it was the first time in 21 years Mylene hadn't fixed something for him. Her phone vibrated. It was the address for the meeting with Barty Vance, the Peachtree Club Library Lounge, in 1 hour. Come alone. Mylene closed the laptop, went to the bathroom, and splashed cold water on her face. She tried to fix her hair. Her suit was wrinkled, but she shook it out. She applied a layer of crimson lipstick. her armor. She looked in the mirror. The woman looking back looked tired, yes, but she looked dangerous. She looked like a mother who had lost her cubs and had nothing left to lose. "You want instability, Atticus," she told her reflection. "I'm going to show you an earthquake." Mylene walked into the Peachtree Club in the same wrinkled suit she had fled her house in, carrying a laptop bag that contained enough evidence to send her husband to a federal correctional institution. The doorman, immaculately uniformed, eyed her skeptically. This place smelled of old money, old grudges, and polished mahogany, a world Barty Vance ruled. She found him in the library lounge, sitting in a leather armchair, reading the Financial Times. He was 65, silver-haired, and had eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand when she approached. Mrs. Dubois Barty said, folding his newspaper precisely. "You look terrible. I feel terrible," Mylene admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. "But my brain is working perfectly." "You mentioned the Beltline deal," Barty cut to the chase, his voice crisp. "You said you had proof." Mylene opened her laptop. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She pulled up the dossier she had compiled in the motel room. She turned the screen towards him. 3 years ago, Atticus beat you for the Beltline lot. You suspected he bribed City Councilman Arthur Finch. You were right." Barty leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Here's the wire transfer," Mylene said, pointing at the screen. $50,000 to a shell company called Finch Management. And here are the emails between Atticus and Finch discussing the expedited rezoning fee. Atticus was sloppy. He used his personal email for initial contact. Barty scrutinized the documents. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to grow colder. "Why are you showing me this now? You were the COO. You benefited from this deal." "I didn't know," Mylene said, her voice steady. Atticus kept a parallel set of books. "I found it last night after he threw me out of my house, froze my accounts, and put my sister in my bed." Barty looked up, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his face. "His sister? And my mother is cheering them on." Mylene added, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "It's a full-on family reunion, and I'm the only one not invited." She took a breath. "Mr. Vance, I didn't come here to gossip. I came here to make a deal. Atticus is trying to destroy me. He has forged my signature on fraudulent loans. He is embezzling company funds. He's going to leave Sterling Ridge Realty a smoking crater. Do you want me to save it?" Barty raised an eyebrow. "I want you to help me bury him. And in exchange, I will give you the Beltline property. Continue." "Atticus is over-leveraged. He's cash poor. He's about to default on construction loans. If you step in now as a white knight investor, offering a bridge loan to save the project, he'll take it. He's desperate. And in the loan contract, we embed a guarantee clause. If he defaults, which he will, because I know the real numbers, you get the assets, specifically the Beltline deed." Barty stared at Mylene for a long moment. The silence stretched thick and tense. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. "You are vengeful, aren't you?" Barty said softly. "I'm efficient," Mylene corrected. "Atticus thinks I'm a scorned wife who will cry in a corner. He doesn't realize that I'm the one who wrote his business plan." Barty closed Mylene's laptop and pushed it back to her. "I like you, Mylene. You have grit. Atticus always struck me as a peacock. All feathers, no flight. But you're a hawk." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my general counsel, Graham Thorne. He's the best litigator in Atlanta. He will represent you in the divorce. Pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership." "Thank you, Mylene," whispered the relief flooding her, loosening the tight knot in her chest. And Mylene Barty added, his eyes hard. "Don't disappoint me. If we do this, we destroy him completely. No mercy. No taking him back when he cries." "He won't be crying," Mylene said, thinking of Atticus's smirk when he took her ring. "He'll be screaming." Barty nodded. Good. Now let's get you a hotel room that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a war if you haven't slept. That night, Mylene slept in a suite at the St. Regis Atlanta, paid for by Vance Enterprises. She took a long bath, scrubbing the motel grain from her skin until it felt warm and clean. As she lay between the crisp, clean sheets, she felt a deep shift inside her. For 20 years, she had been offensive. She had smoothed over Atticus's mistakes, cleaned up his messes, made him look good. She had been the invisible glue holding everything together. Now she was going to be assaulted. She was going to dissolve everything he thought he'd done. She picked up her brain phone and sent Barty a one-word text. He read it. 3 days later, the trap was set. Barty's lawyer, a terrifyingly calm man named Graham Thorne, had drafted the divorce settlement. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection. On the surface, it looked like a complete surrender. Atticus keeps the family home. Atticus keeps full ownership of Sterling Ridge Realty. Mylene receives a one-time lump sum of $500,000, a fraction of what she was due. Mylene waives all claim to future alimony. It looked like she was giving up. It looked like she was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run. Atticus would love it. It fed his ego perfectly. But buried deep in the 60-page document in Section 14, Subsection C, Paragraph 4, was the poison pill clause. In the event that either party to this agreement is found to have engaged in undisclosed criminal activity, fraud or embezzlement during the marriage, or is convicted of a felony within 24 months of signing this agreement, in its entirety shall be null and void. In such event, all assets, including 100% of company stock and real property, shall revert to the non-offending party as punitive damages. Atticus never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that, but his lawyer, Julian Croft, was lazy. Mylene knew because she used to pay his invoices. Croft would skim the contracts, look for the big numbers, the settlement, the alimony. He wouldn't look for a specific reversion clause buried in generic liability text. Mylene met Atticus and his lawyer at Croft's opulent downtown office. She wore no makeup. She wore an old faded sweater. She kept her head down, staring at the Persian rug. She needed to sell the image of the defeated woman. Atticus strode in like he owned the world. He wore a new Italian suit and smelled of expensive cologne. Probably a gift from Serafina. Well, look who crawled out of her hole, Atticus sneered as he sat down, a triumphant glint in his eyes. I hope you're ready to sign Mylene. Serafina and I have wedding invitations to order. Just give me the check, Mylene said in a trembling voice, barely audible. I just want to leave Atticus. I can't fight you anymore. Atticus laughed, looking at Croft. See, I told you she'd surrender. She has no stomach for this. Croft slid the papers across the table. Standard agreement, Mylene. You walk away with $500,000 and a clean slate. Just sign here, here and here. Mylene picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking, partly acting, partly pure adrenaline. What about Cale? She asked softly. Cale is staying with me, Atticus said, leaning back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. He's my vice president now. We're going to build an empire together without your constant nagging. Mylene felt a sharp pang in her chest, but she swallowed it. Okay, take care of him. Sign the damn papers, Mylene. She signed her name on the line that seemingly stripped her of 20 years of hard work. Then Atticus signed. He did it with a flourish, a large, arrogant A. Done, Croft said, closing the folder with a snap. The check will be wired to your account tomorrow. Atticus stood up and buttoned his jacket. He gave Mylene a smirk that sent chills down her spine. You know, Mylene, you should thank me. You were always too uptight for this life. Go live on a farm or something. Find yourself a nice librarian. Goodbye. Atticus. Mylene whispered, her voice laced with an icy promise he couldn't yet hear. As she walked towards the elevator, she heard Atticus laughing with Croft. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the beach house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. Mylene leaned against the cold metal wall and let out a long, slow breath. She had signed. The poison pill was active. Now all she had to do was prove the fraud, and she already had the evidence. She just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than the wedding? Atticus and Serafina had announced the date. It was in 3 weeks. A rushed wedding, they called it. They wanted to be legitimized before the spring gala season. 3 weeks. That was Mylena's timeline. She stepped out of the building and into Barty's waiting chauffeured car. Did he sign? Barty asked from the back seat, not looking up from his tablet. He signed. Mylene said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. He thinks he bought my silence for $500,000. He just signed over his entire life. Barty poured her a glass of sparkling water. To the architect. To the demolition, Mylene replied, clinking her glass against his. The next 3 weeks were an exercise in masochism. Mylena had to remain invisible, while Atticus and Serafina paraded their victory all over Atlanta. She rented a small, discreet apartment in the North End, using her maiden name. She spent her days with Barty's forensic accountants building the case. They were turning the raw data she had stolen into a legal sledgehammer. Every night, Mylene tortured herself by checking social media. Serafina's Instagram was a spew of luxury. A photo of a new convertible Mercedes. My future hubby spoils me, had blessed #new beginnings. A photo of Mylene's dining room redecorated with tacky gold wallpaper. Out with the old, in with the glam. Finally making this house a home. That hurt. Watching Serafina erase Mylene's touch from the home she built. But the most painful posts came from her mother. Ilara posted a picture of the 3 of them, Atticus, Serafina, and herself, toasting with champagne flutes at a tasting menu dinner. The caption, "Finally a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter Serafina and my wonderful son-in-law Atticus. True love always wins. True love." Ilara had sold her eldest daughter out for a seat at a fancy table. And Cale was silent on social media, but Mylene saw the credit card alerts on the secondary accounts. She still monitored the ones Atticus hadn't found yet. Nobleman's Liquor, $400. Capital Nightclub, $10,000. Bail Bonds, $500. Her son was in a freefall, and instead of parenting him, Atticus was indulging him. Mylene wanted to rush in and save him, but Barty stopped her. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved," Mylene and Barty told her softly. His gaze steady. He chose his side. Let him see what that side truly looks like when the lights go out. Mylene knew he was right, but it felt like cutting off a limb, a part of her own being. Meanwhile, the company was rotting from the inside. Mylene's spies, Reese, in accounting, and Ilara's former colleague Daphne in project management, gave her daily updates. "Atticus hasn't been in the office past 2 p.m. in weeks," Reese wrote. "He's letting Serafina plan the company's rebrand. She wants to change the logo to pink and gold." Pink and gold? Mylene scoffed. For a commercial real estate firm. "Contractors are threatening to walk off the Highland site," Daphne reported. "Atticus said the check is in the mail." "It's not. He used the construction money to pay for the wedding venue. Let it burn," Mylene told them, her voice devoid of emotion. "Just document everything. Save every email where he tells you to delay payments." The wedding was going to be at the St. Regis in the Grand Ballroom. It was the most expensive venue in the city. Serafina had invited 300 people, investors, politicians, local celebrities. They wanted to cement their status as Atlanta's new power couple. They wanted an audience. Good. Mylene thought, looking at the invitation Reese had secured for her. You want a spectacle, I'll give you a spectacle. 2 days before the wedding, Mylene got one last piece of leverage. It came from an unexpected source. Her burner phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mylene. It's Desmond. Desmond. Serafina's ex-husband, the mechanic she had bled dry. Desmond, Mylene said, surprised. How are you? I'm okay. Look, I heard what happened. What they did to you. It's disgusting. He paused, then lowered his voice. I got something. What is it? When Serafina left me, she left a box of papers in the garage. Desmond continued. I was going to burn them, but I looked through them last night. Mylene. She has credit cards in your name from 3 years ago. What Mylene's blood ran cold. She opened them when she was staying with you. She intercepted the mail. She maxed them out and then hid the statements. But I found the collection agency letters, and I found a letter from Atticus. From Atticus. Yeah. He paid one of the cards off. The letter says, I covered this one, but you have to be more careful. If Mylene sees this on her credit report, we're both dead. Stick to the plan. 2 more years and we take it all. 2 more years. The timeline fit perfectly. Atticus had been conspiring with Serafina to steal Mylene's identity and her money while Mylene was feeding her and giving her a job. Desmond. Mylene said, her voice trembling with a renewed fury. Can you bring me that box? I'm on my way, he said. When Desmond handed Mylene that box, she felt the last lock click into place. This wasn't just fraud. It was a predatory conspiracy, calculated and evil. She looked at the handwritten letter from Atticus. 2 more years, and we take it all. She locked the letter in her safe, a small, impenetrable box Barty had provided. Thank you, Desmond, she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Give them hell, Mylene, he said with a grim smile. Oh, I plan to, she replied. I plan to give them the whole damned hell. The day before the wedding, Mylene did something dangerous. She went to see Cale. She knew she shouldn't. Barty advised against it, reminding her of the coldness in Cale's eyes. But Mylene was a mother first and a vengeful ex-wife second. She needed to give him one last chance to get off the sinking ship. She waited outside his new penthouse, the one Atticus bought with company funds. At 11 a.m., Cale stumbled out looking hungover. He wore designer sunglasses and a sweatshirt that cost more than Mylene's first car. Cale, she called. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw her, his face hardened. Mum, what are you doing here? Are you stalking me now? I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving. He spat, walking toward his Porsche. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the Southern Region portfolio. Cale listened to me, Mylene said, stepping into his path. Your father is lying to you. The company is bankrupt. He's stealing money to pay for this lifestyle. He's using you as a shield. When the feds come, and they are coming, your name is on the documents. Cale laughed. It was a hollow, brittle sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad is winning and you're a nobody. You're living in some slum, aren't you? Dad told me. I'm living in reality. Mylene said, her voice urgent. Cale, please don't go to the wedding tomorrow. Just say you're sick. Go stay with your friends. Just don't be standing up there with him when it happens. What happens? He challenged a sneer on his lips. Are you going to crash it? Are you going to make a scene? God. You're pathetic, Mum. Dad said you'd try to ruin it. He called me pathetic. Mylene felt the anger surge, a hot flush spreading across her face. But she tamped it down. Cale, look at me. I raised you, I know you. You are not this person. You are kind, you are smart. You are not a thief. I'm not a thief, he shouted, his face flushing crimson. I'm a businessman like Dad. Dad is a fraud, Mylene yelled back, her voice cracking with the effort to hold back her despair. And Serafina is a parasite. And if you stay with them, you will sink with them. Cale glared at her. Then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. Get away from me. He got into his car and revved the engine aggressively. As he spun out of the parking garage, he rolled down the window and yelled, "Don't come tomorrow, Mum. Nobody wants you there." You're the past. Mylene watched him drive away, her heart breaking again. But this time, the brake was cleaner, more surgical. She had tried. She had reached out her hand. He had slapped it away. He was on his own now. She drove back to her apartment. Barty was waiting with the final preparations. "How did it go?" he asked, though he clearly knew the answer from her ravaged face. "He's gone," Mylene said flatly, completely brainwashed. "Then he will learn the hard way." Barty said, his tone firm. "Are you ready for tomorrow? We have the projector access codes." The police are briefed. Inspector Alistair Bell is waiting in the lobby at 8:30 p.m. "Yes." Barty handed her a garment bag. "Then you'll need this." Mylene unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit. It wasn't a frantic, desperate ex-wife's dress. It was a sleek, custom-tailored black tuxedo. Yves Saint Laurent. Powerful, elegant, severe. "Put on your armor," Mylene Barty said. "Tomorrow you are not the victim. You are the executioner." Mylene touched the fabric. It was cool and smooth. "Thank you, Barty. Get some rest," he said. "It's going to be a long night." Mylene didn't rest. She sat by the window watching the city lights. She thought of Atticus and Serafina, probably rehearsing their vows right now, probably laughing about how they had gotten away with it. 2 more years and we take it all. They wouldn't get 2 years. They wouldn't even get 2 days. Tomorrow the new Mr. and Mrs. Sterling were going to have a very different kind of reception. The wedding morning dawned grey and cloudy, a perfect day in Atlanta for a funeral. Mylene spent the morning reviewing the presentation. They had timed it perfectly. It would start right after the video montage of their love story that Serafina had commissioned for $20,000. At 6 p.m., the guests began arriving at the St. Regis. Mylene watched the live feed from a camera Barty had installed in the ballroom. He had an ownership stake in the hotel. Gaining access was trivial. The ballroom was nauseatingly opulent. The room was covered in crystal and pink roses, thousands of them. There was an ice sculpture of Atticus and Serafina entwined, a grotesque monument to their deceit. Mylene watched her mother Ilara greeting guests. She wore a champagne-coloured dress that was too youthful for her, beaming, as if she had won the lottery. "Yes, isn't it wonderful?" Mylene heard her tell a confused cousin. "They're soulmates." Mylene. Oh, poor Mylene couldn't handle Atticus's success. "She's taking some time off." Mylene saw Atticus. He looked nervous, but triumphant. He was shaking hands, patting backs, playing the role of the benevolent king. And Serafina. She walked in wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, draped in diamonds. Diamonds Mylene's company paid for. She was gorgeous. Mylene had to admit it. Gorgeous and rotten. The ceremony began. Mylene listened to them exchange vows. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Atticus said, looking deeply into Serafina's eyes. A practiced sincerity that Mylene now recognized as pure artifice. "I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy." Serafina cooed, her voice dripping with syrupy affection. Mylene was sitting at the hotel suite upstairs, sipping black coffee. "Lies," she whispered. "Every word is a lie. Are we ready?" Barty asked, checking his watch. The signal was live, the technician confirmed. "As soon as you give the order, we hijack the feed." "Not yet," Mylene said. "Wait for the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and looking at the screens." The reception began. The champagne was flowing. Atticus stood up to give a speech. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he boomed, holding Serafina's hand. "This has been a long journey, a journey to find true happiness. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions to find your real destiny." The crowd politely applauded, though Mylene saw some uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew the scandal. They just didn't care as long as the open bar was premium. And to my new wife, Serafina Atticus, continued his voice thick with emotion. You're my muse, my rock, my everything. Mylene's burner phone vibrated. It was the signal. Now, she said, down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed for the video montage. Sentimental music began to play. Photos of Atticus and Serafina on yachts in Paris on the beach flashed across the huge screens behind the head table. The crowd sighed. Mylene stood up, smoothing her tuxedo jacket. She left the suite and headed for the elevator. Showtime, Barty said, walking beside her. Inside the elevator, Mylene watched the numbers drop. 10. 9. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and heavy like a war drum. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Inspector Alistair Bell and 2 uniformed officers were waiting. Mrs. Dubois, the inspector, asked. Yes, we have the warrant. We're ready when you are. Give me 5 minutes. Mylene said, her voice calm. I want them to see it before they get the cuffs. Understood. Mylene walked toward the ballroom doors. The security guards Atticus had hired to keep her out stepped forward. Ma'am, this is a private event. Barty Vance stepped out from behind her, his presence radiating authority. And I own the building. Step aside or you'll be looking for work tomorrow. The guards hesitated, recognized Barty, and immediately backed away. Mylene pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music had just reached a crescendo. The video on the screen showed Atticus and Serafina kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower, and then the screen flickered. The music cut out with a screech of feedback. The room fell silent. On the massive screens, the romantic image faded. In its place appeared an austere spreadsheet filled with red numbers and then a document, a credit card statement. Name Serafina Dubois. Address 124 Oak Street. Mylene's house. Purchase diamond ring Tiffany & Company, $25,000. Paid by Sterling Ridge corporate account. A murmur swept through the crowd like dry leaves rustling. What is that, Serafina? Someone whispered. Serafina stood up, her face pale beneath her veil. Atticus, fix it. Cut the feed. Atticus shouted at the audio-visual booth. Turn it off. But the technician in the booth was Mylene's. He didn't turn it off. He turned up the volume, and then Mylene's pre-recorded voice boomed through the speakers. Hello, Atticus. Hello, Serafina. You wanted a family reunion. You wanted everyone to witness your union. Well, let's show them what this union is really built on. All heads snapped around, not toward the screen, but toward the back of the room. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 pairs of eyes turned in their seats to look at Mylene. She walked down the center aisle, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The black tuxedo made her look like a shadow against the sea of pink flowers. Atticus was frozen at the head table, his handsome face draining of all color. Serafina was clutching her napkin to her chest, her mouth agape. Her mother, Ilara, looked like she was about to have a stroke. Mylene Atticus whispered the microphone, picking up his shaky voice. What are you doing? Mylene didn't stop until she reached the center of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. She looked at them, the people who had been her world, now just small, frightened figures on a stage. I'm here to offer a toast, Mylene said, her voice projecting clearly. No microphone needed. She held a remote control. She pressed it. The screen behind them changed again. This time, it was the email chain between Atticus and the private investigator. Atticus Preston, look harder or invent something. I can't afford to give her half. The crowd gasped. Mylene saw investors' men, Atticus respected men. He needed leaning in, whispering furiously. Turn it off! Atticus screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. Security, get her out of here. Sit down, Atticus. Barty Vance's voice boomed from the entrance, cutting through the rising panic. Unless you want to add assault to your list of felonies. Atticus froze. He saw Barty. He saw Inspector Bell and the police waiting in the shadows by the exit. This is fake. Serafina shrieked, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She's jealous. She hacked the system. She's crazy. Mylene pressed the remote again. A new document appeared. The falsified loan application for the Beltline project, the one with Mylena's signature clumsily pasted on. Is documentary forgery crazy? Serafina Mylene asked calmly. Is bank fraud crazy? Because those are years in federal prison. And guess whose name is on the shell companies receiving the stolen funds? Mylene pressed again. Orion Holdings Group. Owner Serafina Dubois. Mylene pointed at her sister. You're not just a mistress, you're a mule. Atticus used you to launder $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the IRS comes looking, they'll come for your signature? Serafina looked at Atticus, her eyes wide with horror. Atticus did. Did you say it was tax optimization? You said it was legal. Shut up, Serafina, Atticus hissed, trying to silence her. Oh, don't stop him, Mylene said, smiling coldly. Let him explain. Let him explain to our mother what he really calls her. Click. The email appeared. Subject, the old lady. Atticus just cut Ilara another check from the fund. The old lady is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep Mylene in the dark. She'd sell her own daughter out for a remodeling budget. Ilara made a sound that was half whimper, half choke. She stood up. Her hands trembling so hard, she knocked over her champagne glass. Atticus. You called me that. After everything I did for you, I sided with you. I betrayed my own daughter for you. And what did you get? Mother Mylene said, looking at her with a chilling pity. A seat at a wedding that's about to become a crime scene. Atticus looked around the room, his eyes frantic. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. He saw investors walking out. He saw the waiters stop to stare. He saw the end. You signed the agreement, he shouted, desperate, clinging to his last flimsy defense. You signed it. You gave up everything. You can't touch the company. Section 14. Mylene said simply. The poison pill. If you committed a felony, the agreement is null and void, and everything the house, the company, the assets, reverts to me. Atticus's knees buckled. He sagged back into his chair, looking like a marionette whose strings had been cut. And Kale Mylene said, turning her gaze to her son, who was sitting at the end of the table, ghost white. Kale looked at Mylene, terrified. He looked at the screen, which was now displaying his own text messages. VP. Seriously, okay, I'm in. What do I have to do? You wanted to be a businessman, Kale Mylene said softly, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Well, here's your first lesson. Vet your partners carefully. Mylene pressed the remote one last time. A video played. It was surveillance footage from the company parking garage. It showed Atticus arguing with Serafina 2 days before. Atticus, on video. Once we get the Vance money, we dump the kid. Kale is dead weight. We leave him with the tax debt and move to Monaco. He's too stupid to realize. The ballroom went silent. Kale slowly stood up. He looked at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was gone, replaced by a devastating comprehension. Dad, Kale whispered, his voice barely audible. You were going to abandon me, Atticus stammered. Jay, no, I was stressed. It's out of context. You called me stupid, Kale said, his voice cracking. You said I was dead weight. Kale, sit down, Atticus ordered, trying to regain control, but his voice was weak, pleading. Don't listen to her. Kale didn't sit. He picked up his glass of champagne and threw it into Atticus's face. I hate you, Kale screamed. I hate you. Chaos erupted. Ilara sobbed. Serafina hyperventilated her perfect Vera Wang gown, suddenly looking like a prison uniform. Atticus wiped the champagne from his face, looking like a drowned rat, utterly pathetic. Mylene lowered the remote. The presentation was over. She nodded to Inspector Bell. The police walked into the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Atticus Sterling, the inspector, announced, his voice clear and authoritative. "You are under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and documentary forgery, Serafina Dubois." He continued, turning to Mylene's sister, whose eyes darted around frantically. "You are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering." "No!" Serafina shrieked as an officer grabbed her wrists. "I didn't know, I'm just his fiancée. He made me do it. Tell it to the judge," the officer said, snapping the handcuffs shut. Atticus didn't yell. He just stared at Mylene. As he was being cuffed, he locked eyes with her. "You ruined everything." He spat, his voice filled with a desperate, impotent rage. "You bitter, vengeful witch." Mylene walked closer to him. She stood so close she could smell his fear, sharp and acrid. "I didn't ruin anything, Atticus," she said, quiet as a frozen lake. "I just turned on the lights." She paused, letting her words sink in, then delivered the coup de grace. "And you're just a cockroach that got caught." They dragged him away. The wedding guests stood in stunned silence. The only sound was Ilara's heartbroken weeping. Mylene looked at the head table one last time. The cake was untouched. The flowers were perfect. The illusion was destroyed. She turned to Barty Vance. "I think I'm finished here." "Brilliant," Barty said, offering her his arm. "Absolutely brilliant." As they walked out, Mylene didn't look back at her crying mother or her devastated son. Not yet. They had made their bed. Tonight they had to sleep in it. The days following the wedding were a media circus. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran the story on the front page, "I do not real estate mogul. Arrested at the altar." Mylene didn't give interviews. She let the evidence speak for itself. She went back to her house 3 days later. The police had cleared it as a crime scene. It felt strange to walk back into the rooms she had designed, the silent witnesses to her undoing and her rebirth. Serafina's things were everywhere. Tacky clothes, cheap magazines, half-empty wine bottles. Mylene hired a cleaning crew. "Throw out everything," she told them. "Everything that isn't mine. Burn the sheets, change the mattresses." She wanted to scrub Serafina's DNA from her life. Atticus was denied bail. The judge deemed him a flight risk due to the video-recorded Monaco plan. He was in the Federal Correctional Institution in Georgia, trading his Italian suits for an orange jumpsuit. Serafina made bail, paid by Mylene's mother, who had liquidated her retirement savings to get her baby out. But Serafina wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years. Her face was all over the internet as the jail-bound gold digger. A week later, Ilara came to see Mylene. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red. She stood on Mylene's porch, trembling in the brisk autumn air. Mylene, her voice shook a pathetic ghost of its former imperiousness. "Ilara," Mylene said, blocking the door, her stance unyielding. "Don't call me Mom. Can I come in?" "It's freezing." "You can say what you have to say from there." Ilara shivered. "Mylene, please be reasonable. Serafina is terrified. She's just a girl. She didn't know what she was doing." Atticus manipulated her. "Serafina is 40 years old," Mylene said coldly. "She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money." She signed the papers. "She's your sister," Ilara wailed, her grief turning into the familiar family venom. "You can't let her go to prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the prosecutor it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a felony. If you do this," Ilara hissed, "you're no daughter of mine. You're destroying this family." Mylene laughed. It was a light, free sound. Lara, you destroyed this family 20 years ago when you decided Serafina was the princess and I was the servant. You haven't come to apologize. You've come to ask me to fix it again. You want me to be the scapegoat one last time, so Serafina can walk free. She paused, letting the bitter truth hang in the air. She's delicate. She's a felon, and you're an accomplice. I saw the checks Atticus wrote you. Consulting fees. You accepted money to help them manipulate me. Ilara paled, her eyes darting away. I'm not filing charges against you, Ilara. Mylene said, her voice softening, but with a steel that cut deeper than any accusation. Not because I love you, but because I don't want the shame of seeing my mother's mugshot. But you are dead to me. Don't call me. Don't come here. If you need money, ask Serafina. Mylene paused. Oh, wait. She's broke. She closed the door in Ilara's face. She watched on the security camera as Ilara stayed there, banging on the door, screaming Mylene's name. Then her shoulders slumped. She walked away, a defeated figure fading into the twilight. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was the pain of pulling out a splinter, sharp. Then relief. Then there was KL. He hadn't called. He hadn't come over. Mylene knew he was crashing on a friend's sofa because the authorities had confiscated the penthouse and the Porsche. She waited. She knew he had to come to her on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at Mylene's office, the office that was now solely hers. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. No sunglasses, no attitude. Mum, he asked from the doorway, his voice small. Mylene looked up from her desk. Hello, Kale. He walked in and sat in the chair across from her. He looked at his hands, twisting them nervously. I'm sorry, he whispered. I was stupid. He made me feel important. He told me it was better than college. He told me you were holding me back. And you believed him because it was easier than working. Mylene said softly but firmly. Yes. He admitted, tears dripping onto his jeans. I saw the video. He called me dead weight. He was going to abandon me. I have nothing, Mum. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. They took the car. I have no money. I need help. Mylene looked at her son. She wanted to hug him. She wanted to write him a check and fix everything. But she was the architect now. And you don't build a strong structure on cracked foundations. I love you, Kale, she said. But I'm not going to give you money. He looked up, horrified. But where am I supposed to live? I don't know. You have to figure that out. Mum, please. This is the deal, Mylene said, sliding 2 pieces of paper across the desk. This is a student loan application, and this is a job application for the mailroom at Phoenix Realty, minimum wage. You start at the bottom. You finish your degree at night. The mailroom? He asked, his voice filled with incredulity. Take it or leave it. If you want to be a man, Kale, you earn it. He looked at the papers, then at Mylene, seeing the unyielding resolve in her eyes. Slowly he reached out and took the pen. Okay, he said, his voice trembling. I'll take the job. Good, Mylene said. Report to Reese in HR. He'll give you an ID badge. Don't be late. He stood up. He looked at her. He truly looked at her for the first time in years. You're really scary, Mom, he said with a hint of admiration in his voice. I know, Mylene smiled. Now get to work. The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Atticus Sterling pleaded guilty to bank fraud, embezzlement, and documentary forgery to avoid a 20-year sentence. He received 8 years in federal prison, plus restitution. He looked grey and defeated in the courtroom, his once handsome face hollowed out. He didn't look at Mylene once. Serafina took a plea deal, 3 years in prison for conspiracy and money laundering. She sobbed as the gavel fell, looking at Ilara in the gallery and screaming, Mom, do something. But Ilara couldn't do anything. Ilara was living in a studio apartment, subsisting on social security, having lost her allowance and her pride. Mylene sat in the back row in her black suit. She watched justice served. She didn't feel joy. She felt peace. The ledger was finally corrected. 1 year later, Mylena was in her office on the 40th floor, overlooking the thriving Atlanta skyline. The Phoenix Realty sign on the wall behind her was a sleek silver and blue, no trace of pink. The company was thriving. They had just closed the Beltline deal with Barty Vance. It was going to be a mixed-use development featuring luxury condos, but also affordable housing and a community center. Mylene had insisted on the latter. Her phone vibrated. Kyle, it read. Hey, Mum. Just finished my economics final. I think I aced it. Also, the mailroom team improved sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Am I getting a raise? Mylene smiled, a genuine, warm smile. Don't push it. But dinner is on me tonight at 7. Cale was working hard. He was tired, broke, and humble. And Mylene had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man she knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to mold. A knock came at her door. Come in. Barty Vance walked in with a bottle of champagne. Happy anniversary, he said, of the day you burned down the circus. It feels like a lifetime ago, Mylene said, accepting the flute he offered. You know, Barty said, leaning against her desk, his gaze thoughtful. Atticus sent me a letter from prison. He wants to know if I'll buy his shares of the old shell companies. He needs commissary money. What did you tell him? I told him I only do business with the CEO. And the CEO is busy building an empire. They clinked glasses. Mylene looked out at the city skyline. She had lost a husband. She had lost a sister. She had lost a mother. But she had found herself. She was no longer the scapegoat. She was no longer the fixer. She was no longer the invisible wife. She was Mylene Dubois, the architect. And her life was finally, truly, unequivocally hers. Mylene's journey wasn't just about vengeance. It was about reclamation. It was about realizing that for too long she had mistaken her capacity to give for her inherent worth. She had been the foundation, the builder, the silent engine, always ensuring everyone else's comfort and success at the cost of her own. But true self-worth isn't granted by others, nor is it earned through endless sacrifice. It is an internal conviction, a quiet understanding of your own strength and value, independent of external validation or the demands of those who would exploit it. She learned that sometimes the most profound act of love, both for oneself and for those who have lost their way, is to withdraw the endless cushion, to let them face the consequences of their choices. It is in that space of discomfort that true growth, or at least a stark reckoning with reality, can begin. If you saw yourself in Mylene's story, if you've ever felt like the invisible pillar holding up a world that doesn't see you, know that your strength is not a weakness to be exploited, but a power to be wielded. Don't let anyone dim your light or take the keys to your castle. Subscribe for more stories of resilience, reinvention, and finding your own unwavering strength. May your path be clear, your spirit unburdened, and your peace profound. The end.